Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are jumping right into the high-stakes standoff currently unfolding on Capitol Hill between former Attorney General Pam Bondi and House lawmakers. At the heart of this, the deeply scrutinized handling and release of the Epstein case files. Now, you know how it goes. When intense political oversight crashes into strict legal boundaries, things get confusing, and they get confusing fast. The rhetoric heats up, and the actual core issues just kind of get lost in all the noise. So we're going to cut through that today. We're strictly looking at the documented facts to map out exactly what happened in this critical meeting, who the key players actually are, and where this entire massive investigation stands right now. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. What actually happens when a voluntary congressional interview just completely hits a brick wall? That's the central conflict we're unpacking today. Congressional oversight naturally relies on asking really tough, probing questions, right? I mean, that's the whole point. But witnesses walking into those rooms usually have their own carefully crafted legal strategies for dodging them or setting boundaries. And when you mix high-stakes political investigations with purely voluntary participation, the friction can get incredibly intense. To really understand how we arrived at this current stalemate and why the frustration literally boiled over, we've got to look closely at the room where it all happened.
So, let's set the scene. This past Friday on Capitol Hill, former Attorney General Pam Bondi sat down for what was scheduled as a closed-door interview with House lawmakers. According to reports, the goal here was pretty straightforward. Bondi was there to defend the administration's actions regarding the handling and the highly publicized release of the Epstein case files. Now, because this was behind closed doors, there were zero cameras. We have to rely entirely on what the participants said as they walked out of the room. And well, it became obvious very quickly that the lawmakers' expectations for full transparency and the strict legal boundaries set by Bondi were just miles apart.
Here is the core conflict that really defined that room. Pam Bondi walked in accompanied by a DOJ lawyer, and she brought a very specific defense strategy with her. Since her appearance was strictly voluntary, she had the legal right to decline certain questions. Relying on that, she specifically refused to discuss or answer inquiries about the president's involvement in the release of those files. On the flip side, Democratic lawmakers walked into that exact same room expecting a full, unvarnished accounting of the situation. Instead, they felt their investigation was essentially being stonewalled by a calculated legal technicality. It was a massive disconnect.
To give you a real sense of the palpable friction inside that room, just listen to what Democratic Representative Dave Min bluntly told the press during a break in the interview. Quote, "It's a sham in there. They are not answering any questions." End quote. Those are strong words, for sure, but they perfectly highlight a complete breakdown in the process. When a witness's legal boundaries collide head-on with a committee's demands for answers, the whole thing just grinds to a halt. The lawmakers felt they were getting absolutely nowhere, and that quote captures exactly how heated the atmosphere got when those voluntary boundaries were tested.
So with all of this procedural gridlock and escalating tension, we really have to ask, what exactly is the committee scrutinizing in the first place? Like, what's the actual root cause driving this specific congressional investigation into the Epstein case files? It's so easy to get caught up in the drama of a closed-door standoff, but we need to look past the political theater at the actual documented facts. There are very specific, tangible reasons why lawmakers were pushing so hard for answers, and understanding those reasons is absolutely crucial to understanding the standoff itself.
Lawmakers are essentially zeroing in on two primary criticisms regarding how the administration handled these highly sensitive files. First up, they are scrutinizing a process timeline that they argue was significantly and problematically delayed. But second, and honestly far more critically, they are investigating how the release process ultimately leaked the personal information of potential victims. I mean, think about the gravity of that for a second. The public exposure of survivors' personal details is a massive administrative and legal disaster. It's a catastrophic failure of privacy for vulnerable people, and that is the exact factual issue driving the committee's intense frustration when their questions go unanswered.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the chain of command and responsibility was described under pressure during that interview. When lawmakers pressed her on this deeply flawed release process, Bondi stated that Todd Blanche actually oversaw the publication of the files. Blanche, by the way, is Bondi's former deputy and the current acting attorney general. This is a huge pivot. By pointing to Blanche, Bondi effectively shifted a significant chunk of the administrative responsibility for the file's publication away from herself, placing it directly onto the DOJ's current leadership.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how wide and complex this broader investigation really is. It's like a giant puzzle, and it's definitely not just about Pam Bondi's single Friday interview. There are a lot of moving parts here. Former prison guard Tova Noel and former Epstein assistant Sarah Kellen are also actively testifying in relation to these events. Meanwhile, you've got Representative James Comer facing mounting pressure from Epstein survivors to take much more aggressive action in his oversight role. So what we're actually looking at is this intricate, simultaneous web of ongoing testimonies, shifted responsibilities, and intense political pressure converging all at once.
Because of that perceived stonewalling behind closed doors, pressure from outside groups is rapidly escalating. Epstein survivors are now directly pressing Representative Comer to interview Bondi under oath. And guys, this is a critical distinction that completely changes the game. Friday's interview was voluntary, right? Which gave Bondi the legal leeway to simply decline questions she didn't want to answer. A formal demand to testify under oath, which is typically compelled by a subpoena, completely changes her legal obligations. It dramatically raises the stakes, not to mention the potential consequences for refusing to answer.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. With survivors actively demanding sworn testimony and lawmakers hitting a procedural brick wall right out of the gate, how will this congressional oversight evolve? Are we going to see the committee issue formal subpoenas to compel answers under oath, or will this standoff just remain permanently gridlocked? The legal boundaries have absolutely been tested, the political lines are firmly drawn, and the next move taken by both the committee and the witnesses is going to be critical. Thanks for joining this explainer. We'll be watching closely to see exactly how this complex web unfolds.